I'm just going to pull off the recording and now go to share. So we'll do a little refresh of Ovadiah, what we talked about last time, and then do the rest of our short little 21 verse book. All right. So we talked last time about how there's debate over who Ovadiah was. But ultimately there isn't debate over what the message is. And so it's very clear that we are talking about Edom, as it says explicitly, that, excuse me, right, and God says, all right, I'm gonna make you smaller than everyone else. You thought you got so arrogant, so full of yourself, right? You're all the way up here, and God's gonna pull you all the way down and find you wherever you are. And this is gonna, normally when you're stolen from, they steal most, but not everything. But here it's gonna be totally different. Esav's going to be completely ravaged, right? We talked about all of a sudden now in six, we're talking Esav, not Edom, right? We are, whether consciously or subconsciously, dialing this all the way back to the original conflict of the two brothers. Your allies are, leaving you. We talked Ad Gvul Shilchucha, that their allies turned you back or maybe sent you to the frontier. Everyone is basically tricking you. And that in that day I will make the wise vanish. V'ha'avadati chachamim Edom utvuna mehar Esav. So making all the wise people disappear, which is just such an interesting thing to add, right? That, I mean, it's not good for like a brain drain or whatever it is, but it's an interesting thing to include. Um, and that the warriors will lose heart, v'chatu giborecha. And then Leman yikaret ish mehar Esav mikatel, right? That so basically no one is going to survive the slaughter. And I believe we left here with the mechamas achicha Yaakov techachascha busha v'nicharta leolam. So nichrata, excuse me, for the outrage to your brother Jacob, right? We talked about, well, what is this Hamas achicha Yaakov, right? What is the outrage that Esav did to his brother? Um, but certainly it seems to be whatever it is, it's condemning Edom to a permanent destiny of being cut off forever. Um, all right. Sorry, I'm just getting over a cold, so snushy. So now we get into what actually happened, right? Clearly something terrible happened. Something that evokes, that causes the author to go all the way back to the original relationship, but we don't actually know what it is. Now we see what happened. ביום עמדך מנגד ביום שבות זרים חילו ונוכרים באו שערו ועל ירושלים ידו גורל גם אתה כאחד מהם. On that day, when you stood aloof, when aliens carried off his goods, when foreigners entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem, Gam ata ke'achad mehem. You were as one of them. So before we talk about this, does anyone have a translation other than on that day when you stood aloof?
I have from afar.
Yeah, I like that better, right? So I think that there's two things going on here as I see it, and I find it interesting. The condemnation of Edom to me, it kind of tends to oscillate between these two things. So first of all, Edom stood aside. Um, and I mean, this book he's calls Edom a hostile observer rather than a brother or an ally. So initially, it's standing by, right? Which itself is a horrible thing, right? But at least it's passive. But then they're standing by first, watching others ransack Jerusalem. But now, of course, Edom then actually actively gets involved, right? Cast lots, right? It's what's a way to say that? They're kind of like claiming, like, I'll take this, you get that, I want that. Right now, Edom's actively involved in the ransacking. So it goes from, it's almost like saying it would have been worse. It would have been bad enough if they had just stood back and watched it happen and not defended. But now it then moves up a notch to they were actually actively breaking, participating. And I love this last part line. But first, yes, Rav Yosef.
Yeah, just to say that the Christians translate Psalm 22 in a very similar way, where the Romans um, cast lots over his clothing, but our belief is that, or some of our belief is that
Mhm.
Psalm 22 was written by Esther. So the idea of these enemies standing idly by uh, is always going to be our fate, but I
Mm.
think Obadiah is basically um, I don't know if I should use the word proving, but basically predicting that no matter what, Hashem doesn't allow even those who are just standing idly by to get away with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Right. It's a I mean, it's almost a tired thing to discuss. And certainly I feel like, growing up in my generation and in day school, it's like standing by, right? Watching other things happen. You never, even the people who just stand there and watch are often the worst, da, 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 right? Yeah, but that sense of betrayal is felt at the outset. And I think it's like so telling these last few words, Gam ata ke echad mehem, right? You also were like one of them. It's it's not saying you became one of them, you are one of them, but you were like one of them. Which I find such a beautiful, it's such a telling little statement of how that relationship is understood and the levels of hurt.
Because they can claim that they're only standing by, but really their ignorance their ignorance of the problem and of participating is why, for example, we're not allowed to marry Ammon and Moab because they're not the ones who oppressed us, but the fact that they didn't help us when we were in
Hmm.
distress is also punishable by Hashem.
Yeah. But yeah, but it's still, it's not saying you are one of them. It's saying you were like one of them. It's like I'm almost thinking of, not to belittle it, but like, a kid who's not the coolest kid at school, and then they have a best friend, but then the best friend wants to be part of the cool kid, so the best friend pretends not to know this kid, right? And when there are other people looking, it's so easily saying you're acting like one of them, even though we're not really willing to see them yet as one of them. Like it's almost, and maybe we're just saying, Edom, we expected more of you. I'm not sure,
I think,
but yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I was going to say, I think that's probably true, expected more of them, because my note from Radak is they would stand from afar and rejoice over their destruction when they should have assisted them because of their brotherhood, especially since Hashem had prevented Israel from harming the Edomites when they passed through the desert for that very reason.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a painful book, this book. It is so, it's so sad and so beautiful at the same time. This just this sense of betrayal. Yeah, I mean, we'll see all the nations. There's so many nations that participated in it. And yeah, this one is about Edom, excuse me. So gamata ke'echad mehem. Let's see what else. Ve'al tireh beyom achicha beyom nachro, ve'al tismach livnei Yehuda beyom avdam, ve'al tagdel picha beyom tzara. I'm very curious what your translations have. I'll read this one. How could you gaze with glee on your brother that day, on his day of calamity? How could you gloat over the people of Judah on that day of ruin? How could you loudly jeer on a day of anguish? So, what do you have as a translation?
I haven't, you should not have looked on the day of your brother on the day of his being
Okay.
delivered. You should not have rejoiced about the children of Judah on the day of their destruction, and you should not have spoken proudly on the day of distress.
Yeah, so right, that it's so interesting. I don't know. I wonder why JPS translates it as a question, right? How could you gaze with glee? It's I think the shot, I mean, all means don't, right? Don't look on that day, don't rejoice. and loudly jeer. That seems like instructional. Here, I think it's understood to be something that they already did, which of course makes more sense contextually, right? But to say, how could you, makes it in some ways maybe more powerful, but that's not really what the text is saying. So, yeah. But then, so first of all, that's the grammatic thing, which I'm a little confused by, right? But what did they do? They looked, um, they were happy about what they saw, I guess. And like loudly jeered. Wendy, what do you have loudly jeered? Do you have something different? Tugdale
I
Pith
have
or anyone else?
spoken proudly on the day of their distress.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, literally means like enlarge your mouth, right? So I guess maybe that's what jeering is. Yes. But once again, it's not, the crime is not that you came and stole and did all these bad things. It's that you looked, it's how you felt, right? It's all the secondary things that ultimately don't actually affect an action, right? Whether or not you're smiling when you do something doesn't affect whether you do it. And yet here it's what though that's what's important. It is whether you were happy, whether you looked, whether you like yelled or said something, that's what's the cause of pain. Um, any other, if any other comments, translations, anything, jump in. So then we continue with this how here. Al tavo b'shar ami b'yom edam, al tere gam ata b'ra'ato b'yom edo, ve'al tishlachna b'chelo b'yom edo. How could you enter the gate of my people on its day of disaster, gaze in glee with the others on its misfortune, on its day of disaster, and lay hand on its wealth, excuse me, on its day of disaster, right? So now we get a little bit more into the actual action, but not entirely, right? So they entered the gates, right? After they were breached, you went in. Now we're back to gazing, but you looked at us, you saw how bad things were, and then you took our stuff, right? Basically, you helped yourselves. So now it's action, right? 12 is the stuff secondary, and now it's actually what they did. And so from a historical perspective, right, what this reveals to us is that yes, Edom participated in the looting of Jerusalem. There are debates exactly when this is. I think we tend to assume it's 586, right, when the Babylonian destruction. Um, yeah, so that this is now actually what happened. There's more here. Ve'al ta'amod al haperek lehachrit et plita ve'al tasker sridav b'yom tzara. How could you stand at the passes to cut down its fugitives? How could you betray those who fled on that day of anguish? So still, Edom is not the perpetrator, right? No one's trying to say that Edom was a perpetrator. Edom was a participating bystander, right? Um, and it's just I always find this so interesting. This book is not against Babylonia, right? Bavel. Um, there's a book in Navi again. Nahum is against Assyria, right? And this is against Edom. And those are books that are dedicated to screaming at our enemies. And one of the two is about a nation that never started anything, but they betrayed us. And that's what's so bad. So those are the sins, and now we move to Ki karov yom Hashem al kol hagoyim ka'asher asita ya'aseh lach k'mocha yashuv beroshecha. So, they really rearranged this in the translation here. I mean, the literal translation is the day of God is approaching for all the nations, just like you did will be done to you, right? What do they have here? As you did, so shall be done to you. Your conduct shall be requited. Yea, against all nations, the day of God is at hand. Wendy or anyone else, what do you have as a translation here?
For the day of the Lord over all the nations is close, as you have done shall be done to you. Your recompense shall be returned upon your head.
Yeah, I don't know why JPS, come on, man. Why couldn't you just do that? I don't know. It seems straightforward. Okay. Yes. Yeah. So, and here we are lumping them in with the other nations, right? Like you're going to be part of the reckoning for all the goyim now. And this, yeah, you're now part of them. All right. So we continue. Ki asher shetitem al har kodshi yishtu kol hagoyim tamid v'shatu v'la'u v'hayu kelo hayu. That same cup that you drank on my holy mount shall all nations drink evermore. Drink till their speech grows thick until and they become as though they had never been. All right, Wendy, I'm back to asking you for your translation again.
For as you drank on my holy mount, shall all the nations drink constantly, and they shall drink and be stunned, and they shall be as though they were not.
Great. Yeah, I think that that first half especially makes a lot more sense. Um, right. I mean, it's the thing like the thing that seemed good. Now you're going to drink it until you, the thing that you wanted is now going to happen in such abundance that it's going to like destroy you, basically, right? This is very interesting. The hayu kilo hayu, that you'll become as though you had never been. Anyone want to, how would, what do you see going on here?
You mean it'll be as though they never existed? That they're just going to.
Yeah. I guess I just mean like what is that threat exactly? To say that you're going to be as though you never existed. I mean, to me, I kind of going back to this being like a brotherly relationship. I hear, I wish you had never been born, you know.
Well, it's like there are no more Edomites. We all survived,
mm,
only the
mm,
Jews.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, my guy doesn't really he kind of tapers off here. Yeah, yeah. It's a very interesting wish to say or thing to say. But yeah, you will be as though you had never been. Uvehar Tzion tihiyeh fleta v'haya kodesh v'yarshu beit Yaakov et morashehem. But on Zion's mount a remnant shall survive, and it shall be holy. The house of Jacob shall dispossess those who dispossess them. Right? All right, so revenge. Right? You guys will disappear. We will have a fleta, which I think is interesting because it doesn't say, oh, and we're gonna like dominate and be fine. You know, I mean, in here is the acknowledgement that like the Jews are also gonna largely be destroyed, but what we have different is that like a little bit of us is gonna survive, which is a theme in a lot of Navi, and we can debate how comforting that is, but it's better than the fate of a lot of the others. All right. So, v'haya beit Yaakov ish uveit Yosef lehava uveit Esav lekash. V'dalku vahem v'achalum ve'lo yiheh sarid leveit Esav ki Hashem diber. Oh boy. So the house of Jacob shall be fire, and the house of Joseph flame, and the house of Esav shall be straw. They shall burn it and devour it, and no survivor shall be left of the house of Esav. I guess it, so, I suppose it's interesting when in this short little book we use Esav and when we use Edom, right? House of Beit Yaakov. We're going back to the original names, right? And it's not like that's such a unique thing that happens, but yes, yet once again, it's it's the houses of the directest of the ancestors. Um, and yeah, it'll all be gone. Okay, now we may recognize that oh, sorry, no. V'yarshu hanegev et har Esav ve'hashvela et Plishtim v'yarshu et stay Ephraim et stay Shomron u'Vinyamin et Gilad. Thus they shall possess the Negev and Har Esav, Mount Esav as well, the Shephelah and the Philistia. They shall possess the Ephraimite country and the district of Samaria and Benjamin along with Gilad. Wendy or anyone else, do you have a different translation for 19?
Not hugely, but it says, and the inhabitants of the southland shall inherit the mountains of Esav, and the inhabitants of the plain, the Philistines, and they shall inherit the field of Ephraim and the field of Samaria, and Benjamin with the inhabitants of Gilead.
Oh, right. Oh, I see. Oh, that's very interesting because it's here, thus they shall possess the Negev, but here it's the Negev will possess, right? The residents of the south is what it said, right? So that's what Negev. Um, right. According to JPS, they must have notes here. Who is the they? Meaning of parts of this uncertain. Yeah, who is the they? Huh. Yeah, this is very interesting. Hmm. Do you have any notes on that?
Well, the inhabitants is bracketed every time they use it. So that's
Ah, but inhabitants of like
when
is
they've got the inhabitants of the southland or the inhabitants of the plain, etc., with the inhabitants of Gilead. So they've chosen to add in the inhabitants every time you get a proper noun.
I see, I see. Right. Okay. Yeah, I mean this okay, so this is interesting. Here's what I wonder if what's going on here. The is the they the Israelites, this plata, this like remnant survivor? Because if they are, then what this is saying is that those people who survive will go in and take all this land, right? But as the GPS note points out, well, after the exile of the northern tribes, the city and district of Samaria were occupied mainly by non-Israelites, which I wonder is why you have the translation that the south will inherit these places, meaning is it that Jews will take it, or is it just that anyone who's not Edom will take it, right? Does that make sense? Because, yeah, it certainly seems like this is a bit choppy and all over the place. Um, all right, so v'galut hachel hazeh livnei Yisrael asher kna'anim ad Sarfat v'galut Yerushalayim asher b'Sfarad yarshu et arei hanegev. And that exiled force of Israelites shall possess what belongs to the Phoenicians as far as Sarfat, a town in southern Phoenicia, while the Jerusalem exile, the community of Sepharad, shall possess the towns of the Negev. All right. So, Wendy, do you have any footnotes on the exiled force of Israelites, Galut, Hachel, Hazel, Livnei Yisrael, who that is referring to?
Let me see.
Meaning, is it Israel as in northern tribes? Because then that makes this quite messianically prophetic.
It just keeps quoting other places, and he came to Jerusalem with an army. Isaiah says, and the king of Assyria, etc., etc. 2 Kings reads, and the king of Assyria sent.
Right. Rashi seems to say, read it as the exile of the northern kingdom. So now this isn't just punitive to Edom. This is also like messianically redemptive to the Israel, to the Jews as well, I guess. All right. So that's going in a different direction for sure. I'm just poking around real fast, seeing if
Oh, so here it says the exile, which is of the children of Israel who were exiled from the 10 tribes to the land of the Canaanites, as far as
right.
Zarephath. And then the exile of Jerusalem, which is in Sepharad, who are the people of Judah who were exiled to Sepharad. So it's taking different parts of exiled people.
It's just interesting because the Israel exile at this point is 140 years prior.
Right.
Right. And so that's much different than saying, oh, the people who were exiled 2 months ago. Yeah. That really makes it more messianic in nature. Okay, we'll know just this last line we say after Shirat Hayam as Yashir in Shacharit. Va'alu Moshiim Bahar Tzion lishbot et harisav v'haita Hashem hamlucha. So this is the end of Ovadiah. For liberators shall march up on Mount Zion to reach judgment on Har Esav, on Mount Esav. V'haita Hashem hamlucha. Dominion shall be God's. Do you have it differently, Wendy?
And the Lord shall have the kingdom.
Yeah, that's what it means. Why? It's not dominion, it's the kingdom will return to God. There's something to me about just like I said earlier, when I look at this book, there's so much of the pain of the relationship between Yaakov and Esav and the way that it gets transmitted to their kids and their descendants, the way you see it later in Bamidbar when Adam won't let the Israelites cross through their territory, and the pain just carries generations and generations to the point where what is this ultimate, redemption? It's Har Zion and Har Esav, right? It's not it. It's still brothers. What I mean by brothers is two people, two mountains. It's not like a mismatch. It's not saying we are going to crush you. It's saying that like as two individual units of the same thing, we're going to go head to head, right? And God is going to win. And I don't know if I'm being clear in what I'm saying, but to me, there's just something, I just find it very sad is the pain. I think the book has a really nice way of conveying that pain in subtle ways, and that sense of betrayal and the kind of betrayal that you can only get either from a family member or someone who's so deeply close to you in your life. And just to appreciate the amount of emotional damage that being betrayed by someone you trusted or someone you think you should have trusted, right? And we're not saying that Asaph and Yaakov actually had a good relationship. I think we're mourning the fact that somehow they set aside that relationship and went down a path that brothers shouldn't go down, right? This isn't what is supposed to happen between two brothers, between two nations, between cousins, whatever it is. And that's, I think, really what's being mourned here. You know, it can't be the objective reality because the objective reality is that horrible day. It was the Babylonians breaking through and plundering, and almost like, what do you care if Edom's there too? It's just icing on the cake. Um, yeah, but here it's just the focus is only on that, and I find it very, very sad. Just this relationship never gets redeemed, you know? And then it becomes hopeless once the rabbis say that Edom is the Romans, and then later that becomes the Christians. And our rabbis just, they take it in the direction of this relationship is hopelessly irredeemable, and instead will become paradigmatic of eternal opposition, and attack and abuse and suppression and all the things. In fact, when I taught a class many, 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 many years ago in the Drisha Summer High School program for teenagers on Yaakov and Esav. And for their final assignment, I told them that they were like working in Christian interfaith, Christian Jewish stuff. And in order to represent a positive relationship, they had to write a new midrash on Yaakov and Esav, right? That represented the relationship in a positive way because yeah, that's just not the direction our worlds went. But it's very sad because you just see that, the pain behind it is just so vast. That's what I have to say.
Good.
Yeah.
Is it possible that the Torah was written is that way, gives that story so that we will discuss it this way and someday work it out differently?
I mean, it's a great question, right? I mean, why, like I said in the beginning, why isn't this against Bavel, right? They're the ones who did it. Uh,
Hashem did that, and
right, right.
I believe that he did that so we would listen we would have to listen to each other more deeply.
Mm, mm.
Someday, will we see Esau differently? Will we work it out so that Esau isn't who we think?
I would like that. I think the story, yeah, I was listening to the OU, an OU podcast on Ovadiah, and just it was saying something about, well, Esav, our enemy, da da da. And I was like, what enemy? Esav's not our enemy. Like, please don't say that because it's just, it makes me so sad. That's not true.
But Ruth, did the
Yeah,
rabbis see the Amalek descended from Esau
yeah,
through his
right?
grandson?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it gets worse.
It gets so much worse.
Yeah, we were talking the other day at Yeshiva. Some of us had sort of a smile on our face about the heist at the Louvre.
Ooh.
He said, "No, that's Amalek
Mm.
because it's
House.
the thievery. The
Huh.
lack of their lack of concern about who they were stealing from or what they were.
Mm. Or there, yeah,
That's an indication of a breakdown somewhere.
yeah.
Which we were thinking of movies, but it's not funny.
Mm-hmm.
But some,
Isn't
so I mean, as much as we can talk about messianic times, wouldn't that be Esau and Yaakov coming together?
mm.
So does that mean it'll never happen?
I don't know. Why did it? I don't know the history of how this pasuk got thrown in at the end of Ez Yashir. But that,
Well,
but
I
Jim
read the
Hartzell.
Seinfeld comment, and he's talking about people coming, everyone that came from the exile settled in the South, and others were in the North.
Mm-hmm.
So does it get thrown in there to get us to talk about it again?
Mm-hmm.
Riled up.
Yeah.
Because if we don't get riled up, then how can we get through it? How can we solve it? I mean, if it's just all presented nice to us, then there's nothing to read, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In theory, a hiddush. It's a theory.
Hmm. Yeah. Anyone else? Any other comments? That's our book. This is our Haftorah for Vayishlach. This is just it. This little horrible thing ending with, yep, and in in those final days, Mosheim, those saviors, liberators will march up and judge you, and God is going to be the true king, and that's that. So, yep, that's all. Um, okay, I'm gonna stop share and stop.